So hi, my name's Joe Brewer and I'm a change strategist. And today I want to share with you a book that will help you understand a larger pattern in civilizations as we look at them across the decades and centuries. And that is the relationship between the structure of a society and the land use practices or the management of soil as it pertains to the way that the society grew, how models of ownership arise, and the way that the civilization eventually either fell and collapsed or was able to transform itself and be resilient in times of change. And the book that explores this exceedingly well is this one, Dirt, The Erosion of Civilization by David R. Montgomery. Now, David Montgomery is a soil scientist, and he's a professor of Earth system science at the University of Washington. And what he does in this book, Dirt, is he looks at the data from soil, meaning he goes back and looks at the soil content of different layers of dirt below the ground, and then correlates it with historic events in different regions of the world. So he goes into a lengthy discussion of the different periods of time for the Roman Empire and how the plantations were either large or small and the type of land management practices that were involved, and how they're related to the types of economic systems and political systems that were created. Similarly, when we look at areas like the Nile River in northeastern Africa, especially in Egypt, where there's been a civilization for 8,000, 10,000 years, and they've been living sustainably in that river delta for all of that time, then what will happen when we put in a large industrial scale 20th century dam, as we did in the 1970s? And then we go from a period of 8,000 years of abundant food production to, within 20 years, widespread poverty and malnourishment among the Egyptian people, the Ethiopian people, the Eritrean people, whose livelihoods depend upon the water and land practices associated with the Nile River. So when we look at these large-scale patterns of how human communities use the land and manage ownership and production, like agricultural production of the land, it shapes the types of societies that become possible. And this book also goes into, so you can see on the picture here, this is the Dust Bowl in the southwestern United States in the early 20th century. It also looks at the rise of slavery and its relationship to plantations in the southern United States in its early history. So one thing that I didn't know until I read this book was that the economics of slavery only made sense when the farmers were mostly growing tobacco crops, which are a high market value yield in a small amount of land that rapidly depletes the resources of the land. And so actually the cheapest input into tobacco production, and actually later cotton production had this phenomenon too. The cheapest input was the free, quote unquote, free labor of ownership of other people, of slavery. And as the plantation owners would use up their land and move from place to place, they basically laid the foundations for the economic collapse that helped drive the United States into the Civil War. So in a similar way, land use practices shape the viability or susceptibility and vulnerability of a civilization as time goes on. So if you want to better understand how land practices and soil management in particular relates to the dynamics of civilizations and the viability of political and economic systems, then get Dirt, The Erosion of Civilizations by David Montgomery. I think it's a wonderful book, and I hope you enjoy it too.